Your daily fix of women's mixed martial arts from the UFC, Invicta FC, Bellator, and one championship. Be in the loop, cause Golden State Media Concepts got you covered. Get your fix on women's MMA. We've got you covered on Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Thank you for tuning into the GSMC Women's MMA Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Arnel de Leon, wishing you are doing well for yourself. You, your friends, your family, you're all healthy. Whether you live in the States or internationally, you're all doing fine for yourself during a time of major uncertainty. So for today's Women's MMA Podcast, let's talk about the rankings here, because the rankings here are confusing to me more than anything else. In a recent report, it was talking about how Henry Cejudo was taken off the bantamweight rankings, which is understandable. He gave up the bantamweight title, so currently the flyweight title and the bantamweight title are both gone from the men's divisions, and now the rankings are all being mixed and matched, and for the most part it doesn't make any sense. But what really stands out to me would be the women's strawweight rankings, and the reason is because the more you look into the women's strawweight rankings, the more you realize it doesn't really make that much sense. Because outside the top four, without that, who are the top four fighters in the women's strawweight division? The champion, Weili Zhang, Jessica Andrade, Rose Namajunas, Joanna Jędrzejczyk. Weili Zhang, she's gone. She's in China until this whole coronavirus situation gets all strict, and she can go travel around. Because last time she was here in America, she was stuck in Las Vegas for about a month after a fight with Joanna Jędrzejczyk. And we don't know when international flights will go back to normal again, possibly by the end of this year. But as of right now, Weili Zhang, she's out. Jessica Andrade, she's out. She was supposed to fight Rose Namajunas, but Andrade is like, but since the fight got canceled, she's now like binge eating a lot on McDonald's, and she openly says that she's not available to fight at this moment or anytime soon. So Andrade is out. Rose Namajunas, she's been out for a while. We don't know when she's actually going to officially make a comeback here. Joanna Jędrzejczyk, her war with Weili Zhang took a heavy toll on her physically and mentally. So she's going to be out. She herself says that after this fight, she wants to take a short break from MMA. So we might not see Joanna Jędrzejczyk till maybe next year. Then we have Tatiana Suarez and Nina Ansaroff. I think Nina Ansaroff right now is out with an injury. Tatiana Suarez is also unavailable. So from 1 through 6, the 1 through 6 fighters are currently unavailable. So what happens to the rest of the women's strawweight division here? All right then. So 1 through 4, league of their own, the best pound for pound fighters. I don't think anyone outside the top 4 can take on these 4. I don't believe so. No one from top. It's top. These are the top 4 women. Then everyone else above them doesn't really mean anything. Then we have Claudia Cadella, who just came. Here's the thing. Claudia Cadella defeated Angela Hill in a very close fight that could have gone either way. Angela Hill was coming into the fight with a lot of momentum. And here's the thing. Even Dana White and a lot of MMA analysts were talking about how Angela Hill was a real dark horse in the division. And contrary to what her actual win-loss record is, which isn't all that good, she can take on the very best of anybody outside the top 4, and she could take on anybody in the top 10, and she could potentially win. It won't be that surprising here, but Claudia Cadella, off a close victory over Angela Hill, is number 7. But where's Angela Hill at? Because here's the thing. People can go up in the rankings whether or not they win or lose. It's a strange thing, because it was also being reported that Dominic Cruz went up a ranking after losing to Henry Cejudo. Here's how it goes. Number 12th ranked Dominic Cruz lost to number 1 Henry Cejudo. So not only did he leapfrog 11 people, after losing to Cejudo, then went on to be ranked number 11. How does that work? Where is the logic in that? And then we have Angela Hill. Is the reason why Dominic Cruz going up 1 rank because the number one ranked fighter is unavailable? Is that how it is? No, that's not actually how it works. Because if Dominic Cruz were to go up, then everybody below him would also go up. Everybody would be moving up one. But that's not the actual case. The actual case was Dominic Cruz was the only one in the division to move up by one upon Henry Cejudo retiring. So he got rewarded for losing. What about Angela Hill? Where does Angela Hill go by next? Angela Hill, although she's 7-8 in the UFC, 12-8 in total in terms of her MMA career, she's stuck at 18. She doesn't move anywhere. She stays as the number 18th ranked fighter. Despite an impressive performance, she was more impressive in her bout against Claudia Cadella than Claudia Cadella won, because Claudia Cadella had that lose face where she won the fight. Cadella looks shocked. Angela Hill is mouthing off like a wild person here because she and everyone else thought that Angela Hill should have won that fight. But so Claudia Cadella, she stays put in her division. Hill doesn't go anywhere, but Dominic Cruz goes up. Note, Jeremy Stephens. Jeremy Stephens in the I think it's a featherweight or lightweight. He hasn't won a fight in like 5 years, 4 or 5 years. He's had a bad five fight streak going on here, and he's ranked number 7 in his division. What's going on here? What? It's crazy. Okay, so now we look more into the strawweight rankings here. Remember, 1 through 6 is unavailable. Claudia Cadella is available, and she called out Carla Esparza. Carla Esparza called out Claudia Cadella, and these two are already talking trash to each other via Twitter, so they're already promoting a fight against each other here. And here's the interesting. Carla Esparza, just like Claudia Cadella, barely won her fight against Michelle Waterson. In another fight that a lot of people thought Michelle Waterson should have won. So Claudia Cadella and Carla Esparza are the two highest ranked fighters currently in the strawweight division who are currently active, and they both came off wins, controversial wins, to which they both look like they thought they lost the fight. And then everyone else, all the fight analysts, were questioning whether or not those two fighters even won. So we got two fighters here who a lot of people believe should have lost their fights, are now the only two available fighters, are the two highest ranked available fighters in the women's strawweight division. Meanwhile, Michelle Waterson, just like Angela Hill, had a very impressive performance. Michelle Waterson is ranked number 9. How does that work? How is she ranked number... Okay. She lost to Carla Esparza. Close bout. She lost to Joanna Jacek. Really close bout. That's why she's ranked as high as she is. And her record right now is 5-4. And don't tell me... A lot of people are arguing, like, why is Michelle Waterson ranked this high? Well, it's because of her performances. And in fact, she was also an atomweight champion in another organization. That doesn't make all that much sense, because you know why? Okay, so Michelle Waterson's number 9. Number 10 is Yan Xiaonan, who is 4-0 and has defeated Angela Hill and Carolina Kowalkiewicz. I can't say her name. It's Carolina. So Yan is number 10, but she's undefeated. And she defeated two fighters who are far beyond her in terms of the rankings. But she's number 10. Over somebody like Cynthia Calvillo. Cynthia Calvillo, Alexa Grasso. Alexa Grasso and Yan Xiaonan are almost in the same rank. They're number 10 and number 11. But why is there such a disparity between 10 and 11, considering that Yan is 4-0, defeated Angela Hill and Carolina, but yet Alexa fought against Carla Esparza. She fought Carla Esparza and lost. But she's number 11. The logic here is so inconsistent. Doesn't make any sense. And then we go back here. We go back to Angela Hill, who is she's 7-8. She's 7-8. Okay, I get it. A loss is a loss. Whatever. But shouldn't she? I'm looking at this now because we got another fighter here in Amanda Ribas. who is 3-0. She's set to face against Paige Van Zandt. She's 3-0. She defeated Mackenzie Dern. Good fighter. Randa Marcos. Very underrated fighter. And now she's going to be fighting against Paige Van Zandt, who's not even ranked at all in the top 20 of the women's strawweight division. So Amanda Ribas gets little to nothing in terms of the rankings if sure to beat Paige. We are going to continue this after the short break here with the women's strawweight rankings.
You really can't underestimate the importance of having the right creative work for your brand or your product. Whether it's a logo, a website, a book cover, or an ad campaign, you really need a quality design to make that big difference pop and deliver your overall engagement and success in a competitive market. That's where Design Crowd comes in. Design Crowd has over 750,000 designers from Sydney to San Francisco ready to help you with awesome creative ideas. They make crowdsourcing work for you. So if you need a logo or you're working on your creative branding, you can go to designcrowd.com and post a brief describing the design you need. And then within about 2 to 7 days, you'll receive up to over 100 different designs from designers around the world. Then you pick the best design and approve payment to the designer. So you're only paying for the design that you want. It takes a lot of the guesswork out of freelancing and out of crowdsourcing. And you don't have to be a huge company like Harvard Business School to use Design Crowd, although they have used it as well. You can start a project on Design Crowd for as little as $99. And if you go right now to designcrowd.com/health and wellness or enter the promo code health and wellness on their website, then our health and wellness listeners will receive up to $150 off of your design project. That's designcrowd.com/health and wellness or entering that promo code health and wellness.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
And we are back. So I'm talking about the women's strawweight rankings here. In fact, it doesn't make all that much sense. And I just recently talked about Amanda Ribas, who is 3-0, 9-1 in her entirety of her MMA career, defeating Randa Marcos and Mackenzie Dern, and she's set up against Paige Van Zandt. If Amanda Ribas were to hypothetically defeat Paige Van Zandt, it does nothing. It really doesn't. Like, Paige Van Zandt is going to come into this fight not as a favorite here, but Paige Van Zandt is fighting for the sake of so she can renew her contract. Paige Van Zandt is not even top 20 in the rankings of the women's strawweight division here. And Carolina, she's number 15. How is Carolina ahead of Amanda Ribas and ahead of Angela Hill? No, because Carolina is 5-6. Angela Hill is 7-8. Carolina is coming off 3 losses in a row. Angela Hill is 2-1 in her past 3 fights, and in her last fight, she should have won. It's so inconsistent. It is incredibly inconsistent. Meanwhile, Cynthia Cavello, who's going to be fighting, who could potentially fight against Jessica Ai next month, is lower ranking than Alexa Grasso. Even though Alexa Grasso's 3, and oh my god, it's just these rankings don't make any logical sense. They don't. These really don't, though. And now the next big major fight in the women's strawweight division here is Cadella versus Carla Esparza. Now, who's gonna win this fight? I'm really unsure. But the problem with this matchup here with Claudia Cadella and Carla Esparza, and this is the same issue that Claudia Cadella had with Angela Hill, is that these two fighters, unless they pull out an insanely impressive performance, they're not going to move that much in the rankings, possibly either 1 or 2 spots here. Both Waterson and Esparza talked about this in recent interviews, where they said that if they were to have a great performance against one another, that could give them maybe 1 or 2 fights away from getting a title fight. In Waterson's case, she thought she's only 1 fight away. And so Esparza defeated Michelle Waterson in such an unimpressive fashion that now it's hard to argue for Esparza to compete with anybody in the top 6 rankings, considering the people in the top 6 rankings are unavailable. So if Esparza, let's say this. Let's say Carla Esparza were to defeat Claudia Cadella. Then Esparza would be number 7, Cadella would be number 8. So you're not moving up anywhere. Chael Sonnen said it best, in that everyone above the top 4 is such a mismatch of fighters that it's just not consistent. And unless we have a firm idea of what is happening in the top 4, which we don't know what's happening in the top 4 right now because of the coronavirus pandemic, and also just fighters being unavailable, we don't know what's next with the Straweight division. We don't know. It's hard to fix the situation, considering that both the bantamweight and the flyweight divisions are also very inconsistent for the men's. And according to Dana White, he says that the fixing the bantamweight and the flyweight division right now are not a priority for him. His priority right now is to get a show happening in Las Vegas and make sure that UFC is back on track after the coronavirus is over. And also, there's also being reported in that the UFC are going to have events happening in the Apex facility in Las Vegas. The Nevada State Athletic Commission was able to approve combat sports happening in the Vegas area. Only trade-off, though, is that it'll be a lot more stricter in its guidelines and its health protocols, which is whatever. So we're going to have MMA events happening in Las Vegas, and that's a good thing for Dana White. Now that that's cleared out of the way, he's now planning to have 3 more events happen in the month of June. So he's planning for events happening in May. We have 3 more events happening in June. And then from that point on, a lot of the states are planning to open up early July, end of June. And from that point moving forward, Dana White's now arguing with a lot of people, with other members from other state athletic commissions to have their events happening in their state. We still have Fight Island happening. That's the interesting part. Fight Island is still a potential thing that could actually happen. And UFC just trademarked UFC with the UF and SEA. So, Fight Island is still around the corner. States reopening up due to coronavirus, that's around the corner also. And now we have 2 divisions that don't have champions, and we have 1 division in the women's strawweight rankings that is a complete mess right now because, the pandemic. It's a mess. It's a complete mess right now. And then we get to the women's featherweight division. Let's go to their rankings here. The next major UFC main event here will be... So we got Gilbert Burns and Tyron Woodley. They're headlining the next UFC Fight Night event, which will be happening this Saturday. And then the potential headline main event, will be Amanda Nunes defending her women's featherweight belt against Felicia Spencer. That fight is going to be really fun for me because, in my opinion, Felicia Spencer is one of the biggest underdogs and one of the most underrated fighters in all of women's mixed martial arts, really. I genuinely believe Felicia Spencer has a chance to defeat Nunes. I do so because if you're the one negative blight in Felicia Spencer's MMA career would be her 1 loss to Cristiano Justino, Chris Cyborg. But if you were to look into that fight, if you're just looking at the number, if you just look at the result, be like, oh, of course Cyborg defeated Felicia Spencer. If you actually looked into the fight, Felicia Spencer gave the second toughest fight Chris Cyborg could have had. It's like Chris Cyborg's 2 toughest fights, her loss against Amanda Nunes and Felicia Spencer. Felicia Spencer did a really good job for pretty much stabilizing Chris Cyborg. And then when Felicia Spencer went on to fight against Zara Fern, she fought a lot more better. And I felt like if Felicia Spencer right now were to fight against Chris Cyborg, we might see a much better version of Felicia Spencer in their second bout than their first bout. So Spencer versus Amanda Nunes, this could be a very close fight here, and I'm really excited for it. One thing that I'm not excited about is the fact that there is no featherweight division. That's a problem, though. There is no women's featherweight division, and I'm saying that because if you go to UFC.com, go to the rankings, everything here has a ranking. If you look at women's bantamweight division, for the women's bantamweight division, we have Jermaine Duraname, Holly Holm, Aspen Ladd, Juliana Pena, Irene Aldana, Raquel Pennington, Kaylin Vieira, Yana Kutkaya, Sarah McMahon, Marion Renaud. Alright, we got those 10 fighters from the women's bantamweight division. Now, name 10 fighters from the women's featherweight division. Oh yeah, you know what? There's not even one. There's not even two. Because here's the thing. In the UFC.com rankings, Amanda Nunes is the only name that pops up in the women's featherweight rankings. And she's the champion. There's nobody. Nobody is shown. Not a single name is shown here under the women's featherweight division rankings. Not even Felicia Spencer. Felicia Spencer, she's fighting Amanda Nunes next. And her name is not even in here. And the rankings of UFC.com. To actually see the real to see the rankings, so I had to go to a site called RankingMMA.com. And in this site, it updates all the rankings for all the fighters. And also, it kind of fills in the holes of what's going on in the featherweight division here. So, from the UFC.com rankings, it's only Amanda Nunes. We know Felicia Spencer is next. So, in theory, she's the number one contender. So, the rankings right now, if you were to look at RankingMMA.com, which is not affiliated with UFC, it just points out who are the fighters competing in the featherweight division. We got Amanda Nunes, Felicia Spencer, Megan Anderson, Zara dos Santos, Norma Dumont. Those are the top 5. Then we scroll down to Leah Letson. And that's it. She doesn't even have a number. The reason for why there is a lack of women's fighters available in the women's featherweight rankings is because a lot of these fighters are actually moving down to either the bantamweight or the flyweight divisions. Because the bantamweight and flyweight divisions, they're pretty stacked. And if possible, we got fighters from the women's flyweight division moving down to the women's strawweight division, because the women's strawweight division has to be when everyone is active in the strawweight division. The women's strawweight division is the most competitive division out there in all of women's UFC. Without a doubt about that. So everyone is moving to different weight classes for better competition, except for the women's featherweight division. The only way this division can be fixed up is if the UFC were to hire more women to compete in the women's featherweight rankings and make sure that they don't try to go move down weight classes to bantamweight or flyweight, because that's the only way this division can really be stable. So you're listening to the GSMC Women's MMA Podcast, coming back right after the short break here with some more MMA news.
You really can't underestimate the importance of having the right creative work for your brand or your product. Whether it's a logo, a website, a book cover, or an ad campaign, you really need a quality design to make that big difference pop and deliver your overall engagement and success in a competitive market. That's where Design Crowd comes in. Design Crowd has over 750,000 designers from Sydney to San Francisco ready to help you with awesome creative ideas. They make crowdsourcing work for you. So if you need a logo or you're working on your creative branding, you can go to designcrowd.com and post a brief describing the design you need. And then within about 2 to 7 days, you'll receive up to over 100 different designs from designers around the world. Then you pick the best design and approve payment to the designer. So you're only paying for the design that you want. It takes a lot of the guesswork out of freelancing and out of crowdsourcing. And you don't have to be a huge company like Harvard Business School to use Design Crowd, although they have used it as well. You can start a project on Design Crowd for as little as $99. And if you go right now to designcrowd.com/health and wellness or enter the promo code health and wellness on their website, then our health and wellness listeners will receive up to $150 off of your design project. That's designcrowd.com/health and wellness or entering that promo code health and wellness.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines. They got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
And we are back. So we're talking about the rankings here for the women's strawweight divisions. And so we got fighter here, Angela Hill, who I've talked extensively about, is auctioning UFC Jacksonville fight gear for charity. UFC strawweight Angela Hill is auctioning off her worn UFC Jacksonville fight gear for charity. The featured image here is coming from MMAJunkie.com. Hill has listed worn gloves, wraps, walkout shirt, and shorts in an auction on eBay. This is coming from Angela Hill's Twitter. Auctioning off my gloves and fight kit, all for cash, will go to charity at Direct Relief. Go bid for them. And if you check over here how much they are worth about $518, not including shipping. No, that's the winning bid. So the winning bid is $518, and it has been sold. So, that's one thing though. She's also auctioning off her shirt and shorts, and how much is it? So the gloves are worth $518, and her fight-worn shorts and shirts is worth $510, that being the winning bid. So, really enough, if you look at eBay, there's a lot of signed gear and merch items here. There's like a Tony Ferguson signed jersey card for $200 via eBay. We got here a signed glove here by Uriah Faber. Don't know how much that's worth. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on here. A Conor McGregor UFC kits. Yeah, Conor McGregor UFC fight kits, Reebok champion walkout hoodie. So if you want to dress like the champion, then I guess you could do so. Ronda Rousey, here's a report. They're still selling Ronda Rousey UFC Reebok walkout men's jerseys. Yeah, so Ronda Rousey should still be able to get some money from her merchandising deal with the UFC, right? It only makes the most amount of sense. If you're selling, a product that belongs to Ronda Rousey with Ronda Rousey's name in it, you should get some money from it. That's what I'm saying. At UFC on ESPN 8, Angela Hill lost a controversial split decision to former title challenger Claudia Cadella. The loss snapped a 3-fight win streak for the former Invicta strawweight champ. We also have a plethora of brand new matches being lined up for us in this upcoming Saturday show, along with a number of UFC shows coming up in the month of June. First off, we got Roxanne Modafferi versus Lauren Murphy in the works for UFC June 20 event. A fight matchup between two top 10 ranked contenders is in the works for an upcoming UFC event on June 20. The Happy Warrior Roxanne Modafferi, who is 24-16, is slated to take on Lucky Lauren Murphy, who is 12-4. Modafferi is 2-1 in her last 3 Octagon appearances with impressive victories over Antoniana Shevchenko and Macy Barber. After the win over Barber at UFC 246 in January, Modafferi expresses interest in facing Murphy. Murphy currently rides a 2-fight win streak with victories over Maramara Barella and Andrea Lee. The former bantamweight is 3-1 in the flyweight division since dropping down to 2017. And then we see Lauren Murphy here posting about this on her Instagram. Came home from practice to find a bout agreement in my inbox. Signed, sent, delivered. LFG, you guys are going to love this fight. I can't wait to show you what I've got. Hashtag love is life. Hashtag UFC. Hashtag UFC somewhere. So at least she has some humor coming in here. We've got another announcement here as Raquel Pennington versus Mariah Reneau related to UFC June 20 event also. A matchup between two top 10 contenders also. We got former title challenger Raquel Pennington, who is 10-8, is scheduled to face Marion the Belizean Bruiser Reneau, who is 9-5-1 in her mixed martial arts career. Raquel Pennington lost in January, losing to a decision to Holly Holm prior to UFC 246. She returned to the win column with a decision over Irene Aldana. Reneau currently rides a 2-fight skid with decision losses to Kat Zingano and Yana Kutskaya. An injury forced her out of scheduled bouts with Irene Aldana, and the coronavirus caused a cancellation of a bout against her with Ketlin Vieira back at UFC 250. Another fight here that's been announced here is Katlyn Chookagian versus Antonia Shevchenko, targeted for UFC May 30 events. An exciting flyweight matchup here is in the works at UFC's upcoming Fight Night event on May 30. We got former title challenger Katlyn Chookagian is slated to face on Antonia Shevchenko at the next UFC event on May 30. The UFC Apex facility in Vegas is the rumored target location and venue for the event, and probably is the best location, if not Las Vegas, then Arizona. Chookagian attempted to dethrone flyweight champion Valentina Shevchenko at UFC 247 in February, but was defeated via third-round TKO. Blonde fighter is 4-2 since moving up to the UFC fight division in 2018. The elder Shevchenko sister, Antonina, bounced back from her first loss of her MMA career with a submission win over Lucy Podilova in a Fight of the Night contender here. She signed with the UFC in 2018 after earning a contract in the Contender Series. It is being reported also, we got the long-awaited return of Paige VanZant trying to fight off whatever's left on her contract that she's been doing for the past couple years here. Per Rafael Moreno of Combate, a matchup between Paige VanZant and Amanda Nunes has been rebooked for an upcoming UFC event on July 11, this time at 125 pounds. Paige VanZant vs Amanda Nunes has been rebooked at July 11 per Moreno. This time is being booked to flyweight. Paige VanZant teased earlier that the bout would take place on Fight Island. This was a date where UFC 252, which would now be UFC 251, was scheduled to occur. Amanda Nunes was originally scheduled to face against Paige VanZant back in March. However, an arm injury forced 12-gauge out of the bout. Nunes instead fought Randa Marcos, winning by unanimous decision. After the fight, she expressed on having Paige VanZant having the fight being rebooked at 115 or 125 pounds. Paige VanZant has been out of action since January 2019 due to multiple arm injuries. In her last outing, she defeated Rachel Ostovich via second-round submission. During the time off, Paige VanZant said she was open to returning to strawweight or to flyweight. I talked about the matchup here between Ribas and VanZant, so I'm excited for this matchup here. I'm going to be cheering for Ribas, in my personal opinion, because as of right now, contract negotiations between Paige VanZant and the UFC are a little bit off. If Paige VanZant were to defeat Ribas, and then VanZant decides not to resign, then basically the UFC got nothing to gain from this fight. They really didn't. It helped Paige VanZant in her ability to renegotiate, for a contract, but that's what it really is about. Ribas wants to win this fight in order to climb the rankings. Paige VanZant hopes to win this fight in order to renegotiate a contract. We got another matchup with Courtney Casey versus Gillian Robertson added to UFC June 20 event. A fight bout has been added to an upcoming UFC Fight Night card back in on June 20th. Courtney Casey, who is 9-7, will be sticking around at flyweight to face on against Gillian Robertson, who is 7-4. It's a quick turnaround for Casey, who was triumphant in her octagon return with a first-round submission win over Romero Barella last week. The armbar finish secured cast iron, a $50,000 performance of the night bonus. Congratulations! Robertson was scheduled to return against Talia Santos in Canada, but the bout was scratched due to the coronavirus. She looks to bounce back from her October loss against Macy Barber. Tecia Torres versus Brianna Van Buren is added to the UFC June 20th event. An exciting Straweight matchup has been added to the UFC's upcoming Fight Night event coming up on June 20. The Tiny Tornado Tecia Torres, who is 10-5, is set against former Invicta champion Brianna Van Buren, who is 9-2. Tecia Torres is a perennial Straweight contender, currently rides a 4-fight skid with losses to top-level competition, and former champs like Jessica Andrade and Joanna Jacek, current champ Wally Zhang, and undefeated contender Marina Rodriguez. Van Buren made her UFC debut in July, defeating Leva Souza via unanimous decision prior to signing with the UFC. The Bull was crowned the Invicta FC Strawweight champion by winning the first Phoenix Series one-night tournament. This will be a very close fight, probably the biggest test of Van Buren's career. And also, if Tecia Torres were to defeat Buren here, she could slide her way back into contendership, and maybe we could see rematches with her fighting as with anybody else in the top 5 rank of the Strawweight division. So a lot on the line here in the June 20 event. I won't be surprised if that fight might be the co-main event or main event of this card, since there's a lot at stakes in that division. And for the final reporting here, we got a UFC targeting Jessica Ai versus Cynthia Calvillo for the June 13 main event. First reported by Brett Okamoto of ESPN, the UFC is targeting a fight matchup to headline an upcoming Fight Night card on June 13. Former flyweight title challenger Jessica Ai, who is 15-7, is expected to meet former strawweight Cynthia Calvillo in a June 13 headliner. Jessica Ai attempted to dethrone flyweight champion Valentina Shevchenko, but lost the bout via second round KO back at UFC 238. She bounced back from her first flyweight defeat in the UFC with a victory over Brazil's Viviane Araújo at UFC 245. And after missing weight for a strawweight contest, Cynthia Cabello announced her move up the flyweight division, which she's competed at prior to entering the UFC. Cabello was scheduled to face against Antonina Shevchenko in her UFC fight debut, but the bout was cancelled due to the coronavirus. We got all those matchups coming up in the month of June, and I am incredibly excited, and I can't wait for mixed martial arts action to come back full-time in June. You're listening to the GSMC MMA podcast, coming back right after this short break here. See you soon.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
And we are back. So we got Mackenzie Dern versus Hannah Cifers coming up in the upcoming May 30th UFC on ESPN 9 event coming up this Saturday. And this will be a very close matchup in my personal opinion here, contrary to what the betting odds say they are. So this is coming in from DraftKings.com with the title of Everything You Need to Know About Mackenzie Dern versus Hannah Cifers. And there's a lot of interesting stats here that's being thrown out there. But the UFC is back on Saturday, May 30th with UFC on ESPN 9 live from Las Vegas. The 11-fight card gets underway at 6 p.m. Eastern Time and is headlined by Tyron Woodley vs. Gilbert Burns in a matchup of welterweight contenders. The main card includes a women's strawweight bout between Mackenzie Dern and Hannah Cifers. Both fighters coming into the contest coming off a loss. Dern lost via unanimous decision to Amanda Nunes at UFC Fight Night 161 in October of 2019. Hannah Cifers lost via TKO to Angela Hill at UFC Fight Night 166 this past January. Two very game opponents. Neither fighter should be ashamed of losing to either of those. Both Ribas and Angela Hill are very dangerous contrary to their rankings. Dern, nicknamed Shockwave, is 7-1, has won 4 of her fights by way of submission and 3 by way of decision. She lands a 3.24 second strike per minute while absorbing 4.07. Her average time is 10 minutes and 49 seconds, and she has a 0.46 knockout average. Hannah Cifers is 10-4 with 5 wins by way of KO or TKO and 5 wins by decision. Her 4 losses include 2 KO/TKO defeats, 1 submission, and 1 decision. She lands a 4.91 significant strikes per minute while absorbing 6.59. Her average fight time is 11 minutes and 1 second, and she has a .68 knockdown average. The opening odds here are coming in at Mackenzie Dern minus 400, Hannah Cifers plus 295. A lot of people are predicting Mackenzie Dern to win this fight. Mackenzie Dern is my pick to win this fight, but even then, minus 400? Yikes, that's very tough here. This will definitely be a good matchup between both fighters here. I think stylistically, both fighters match up with each other perfectly. It all comes down to strategy and patience, being the factors into this fight. I say this fight is gonna, at this level, it's gonna end via majority decision or unanimous decision in favor of Mackenzie Dern. I don't see Hannah Cifers defeating against Mackenzie Dern, and I don't see Mackenzie Dern stopping Cifers sometime in the first or second round. I really don't see that. I see this fight going all 3 rounds with Mackenzie Dern winning via unanimous decision. But you never know. Hannah Cifers might win out in this fight though. Hannah Cifers is a very game opponent, and this will be a very difficult opponent that can go either way for Dern or Hannah Cifers. So I'm excited for that. And now, the main event for the prelim card coming up on this Saturday on the UFC on ESPN 9 show is going to be Katlyn Chookagian versus Antonina Shevchenko. So the highlight of the 6-fight prelim card is a women's flyweight contenders bout between Katlyn Chookagian and Antonina Shevchenko. Chookagian is the second-ranked flyweight, while Shevchenko is ranked 12th in the division. Yikes. So here's the thing, even though Shevchenko is ranked 12th in the division, she comes into the UFC with a whole lot of potential, with a whole lot of hype coming in her. Chookagian, nicknamed Blonde Fighter, is 13-3 coming off a third-round TKO loss to Valentina Shevchenko at UFC 247 in February. And yes, Valentina Shevchenko is Antonina's younger sister. Chookagian has won 10 fights by decision, 2 by KO/TKO, and 1 by decision. Her 3 losses included the TKO loss in February and 2 decision losses. She's landing 4.11 significant strikes per minute while absorbing 4.49. Shevchenko is nicknamed Pantera and is 8-1. She has split her last 2 fights after winning 7 straight across multiple promotions. To open her career, she lost for the first time against Roxanne Modafferi via split decision at UFC Fight Night 149. In April of 2019, she beat Lucie Polova after second round technical submission by a rear naked choke. She is landing a 4.02 significant strikes per minute while absorbing 2.37. The opening odds here is Katlyn Chookagian, but with plus 120, Antonina Shevchenko with minus 115. This fight is going to be incredibly close. I am not surprised if this fight here might be the best fight of the entire night, without a doubt about it. Shevchenko lost to Roxanne Modafferi, and if you bet a lot of money on the Modafferi fights, and you predicted Modafferi defeating Shevchenko, I can guarantee you made a lot of money, because most people would have predicted Modafferi losing that fight. Because we've seen fighters, here's the thing, Shevchenko is probably more talented than a whole lot of fighters that Modafferi has fought. It's just in that night, Roxanne Modafferi was just a better fighter. And so, even though Shevchenko lost the fight against Modafferi, her ability to come back here and her fighting against Katlyn Chookagian, who was a title contender, this could really change things up. For all we know, we can see Shevchenko versus Shevchenko, or we can see Katlyn Chookagian defeating Shevchenko, and then from Chookagian defeating Shevchenko could open her up for a rematch against Valentina. Really, the possibilities here are infinite. It's really endless here. But I love the story here. Oh man, younger sister defeated against this one title challenger. Now the older sister is here, and she supposedly is meant to be better than the younger sister. And after losing for the first time against this nerd in Roxanne Modafferi, is hoping to make a huge bounce back victory here. It's gonna be very fun here between Chookagian and Antonina Shevchenko. Who's gonna win this bout here? It can go either way. I predict split decision victory. That's how I put it down. I say it's going to be a split decision victory, and I'm unsure if the prelims go five rounds or not. I'm unsure about that, but I say it's going to be a split decision victory. It can go either way here. The betting odds are very close for a reason, and it's because if one were to say Chookagian wins this fight or Shevchenko wins this fight, anything can happen. For all we know, this fight could end by KO or TKO. I gotta put a more lenient on the side towards Shevchenko off the basis that her defense is a lot more superior than Chookagian's, but Chookagian's cardio and ability to will herself out. Chookagian went toe-to-toe with the champion, so off that basis alone, you should go put some extra bounty points onto Katlyn Chookagian's ability to absorb a lot of damage. Now, the thing, though, is that while Shevchenko is better in terms of her head movement compared to Chookagian, Chookagian is a cardio machine, and considering that Chookagian has performed at a high level for the longest time within the UFC, moreover than Shevchenko, and also the Shevchenko fight she had with Roxanne Modafferi was really game that night. It's just a huge red flag for me, for Antonina. So, my final bet here will be on Shevchenko. I think Shevchenko should win this fight because in her bounce back fight after the Modafferi fight, her head movement was a lot more better, and I think she'll do a lot more better dodging and ducking and avoiding all of Chookagian's strike, while Chookagian has a tendency to kind of fight like a tank at times, which will look bad in front of the judges. So I'm leaning on a split decision, Antonina Shevchenko winning this bout. That's my prediction. And so I'm currently looking right now at the flyweight rankings right now, and it's very stacked and very competitive at this point, which is a complete head turner compared to the featherweight rankings, which I was writing on about earlier in this podcast here. But we got Valentina Shevchenko. I think she's off with an injury, and she's filming a movie, and she's doing press for the movie. It's the movie with Halle Berry, to which Valentina Shevchenko is going to play the role as the main antagonist of the film, and she'll be fighting against Halle Berry, which to me is going to be very hilarious and fun to watch. But if you look at 2 through 8 over here, in the 2 through 8 rankings, it doesn't really matter what's going on outside of the 9, with the exception being Antonina Shevchenko. If Antonina Shevchenko were to defeat Roxanne Modafferi, I could easily see her being sliding her way into the top 10 here. But if you look at the top 8 rankings here, a lot of matchups are coming up in the next. By the end of next month, we are definitely going to see a lot more clear of a picture of what's going to be happening in the flyweight rankings here, because Jessica Eye, Katlyn Chookagian, Jennifer Maia, Roxanne Modafferi, after a huge victory over against Shevchenko. It's also a really good narrative. It's gonna be a really fun narrative. They got these like nerdy, dorky person, Roxanne Modafferi, coming in from the Ultimate Fighter, all defeating against the world champion's older sister. That's actually a really fun storyline there. Joanne Calderwood, title contender, Lauren Murphy's got a matchup coming up. Viviane Araújo versus against Jennifer Maia. All these fighters are going to be matched up with each other, sort of to an extent, in the next 2 months here. And whatever happens by the end of next month is going to clear up the picture of what we can expect off the flyweight scene here. So we got Jessica Eye versus Cynthia Cavello coming up. If Cynthia Cavello can go win this fight, she will slide her way into the top 10 ranking. Cynthia is not even in the top 10. She's not. But yeah, Cynthia Cavello, that we know based on the eye test, is so talented that we can see her slide her way into the top 10. Yeah, Anthony Shevchenko, she's not nowhere near the top 10. Anthony Shevchenko is ranked number 17. So, even though she's the number 17th ranked fighter, she's currently fighting against the number 30 ranked fighter in the flyweight division. So, if Shevchenko wins this, without a doubt, we could see Shevchenko fight against amongst the best in the top 5 in the flyweight division. And maybe, sister for sister, that could be a real possibility then. And then we got Joanne Calderwood, who's pretty much waiting by here. Roxanne Modafferi versus Lauren Murphy. It's so strange. So, Roxanne Modafferi is fighting against these, like, lower-ranked fighters, but she's been avoiding the top rank for a while, and it's because she's 3-4 in her UFC career and tends to struggle with a lot of the top fighters when it comes towards, like, 1 through 4. I expect Modafferi to go defeat Lauren Murphy, and it's going to be a really fun showing here. I'll be right back with some more women's MMA news after the short break.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
And welcome back. So, there are a lot of major important women's fights coming up in the month of June. Starting off with Amanda Nunes versus Felicia Spencer. That's going to be a very fun fight. A lot of people are betting on Amanda Nunes to go completely smoke against Felicia Spencer, but you never know. Spencer is a very tough opponent, even though I myself am predicting Amanda Nunes to defeat Felicia Spencer in the first or second round. That's my guess. Honestly, for all we know, this could be a great war. This could be a very fun fight. Felicia Spencer can go and outbox Nunes. I know it's very strange to think about how Nunes can be outboxed, but when you look at Nunes versus Germaine de Randamie, there were brief moments actually where Nunes was struggling a wee bit on the stand-up game, and I think Felicia Spencer has improved significantly a lot since her loss against Chris Cyborg. That I think Felicia Spencer can pose as a real threat and challenge to Nunes. This could end in an upset victory. We don't know. But really, Nunes versus Felicia Spencer, I'm going to be very excited for that fight when it does happen. But the coach of Nunes, instead of focusing his attention on Felicia Spencer, he's talking about Ronda Rousey for some reason. This is being reported in by BloodyElbow.com. The coach goes on to say, I knew smoke and mirrors Ronda Rousey would be really easy for Amanda Nunes. Subheadline here, Coach Den Thomas talks about his approach for Amanda Nunes' title fight against Ronda Rousey in 2016. For 3 solid years, Ronda Rousey was deemed as an unstoppable force in women's MMA that all changed when she went on the receiving end of Holly Holm's left high kick in late 2015. Roddy tried to get herself back in the groove when she immediately challenged Amanda Nunes for her former title back at UFC 207 a year later. Instead, she was stopped inside, and just 48 seconds of action ultimately caused her to turn her back on the sport at the age of 29. Can you believe that? Ronda Rousey, she peaked at 27 years old, which is very strange because at 29 you should still be at your peak. But there was a lot of hype surrounding the events, Ronda Rousey's 2016 return, and she has been billed as the betting favorite by most bookmakers, which astounds the heck out of me that a lot of people predicted Ronda Rousey to go win that fight. But I remember going up into that fight, there was a lot of hype behind Ronda Rousey's return. If you followed all the interviews, all the press releases, and you follow like Ronda Rousey on Instagram, and you see all like the training camp videos, Ronda Rousey looked yoked in her fight. She looked really good. Part of the fight, she looked really good on paper in the fight. Like aesthetically, like if you look at in terms of aesthetics, if you look at the training videos, if you look at Ronda Rousey's physique, if you look at how she carries herself in the interviews, everyone was hyping Ronda Rousey to go potentially defeat Amanda Nunes in the first round. But Amanda Nunes, Coach Din Thomas says he knew from the get-go what the former women's bantamweight queen wasn't really the beast she was being deemed at the time. I think the first one that I really invested so much into, that I put into, was Amanda Nunes versus Ronda Rousey. Din Thomas told MMA Junkie Radio, and this was when I was like, this is a fool's bet. Because Amanda was the underdog in that fight, I think, and she was. After studying Ronda Rousey, I realized that she was smoke and mirrors, is what I could say, and she wasn't as good as everybody thought she was. She did some things better than everybody else, but she wasn't as good as everybody else as she thought she was. After doing his homework, Thomas knew that the fight was theirs to win. So I put a lot of effort into that. I watched her and I saw that she would throw punches at the same time with two different hands, and she was really awkward in certain spots, he explained. So I was like, wow, this is going to be a really easy fight for Amanda Nunes. And it turned out to be a really easy fight for Amanda. As the bantamweight and featherweight champion, Nunes sits on top of the pound-for-pound rankings. She will defend the 145-pound strap for the first time at UFC 250 on June 6th against Felicia Spencer. So we got the coach here pretty much talking shade onto Ronda Rousey over here, and I'm kind of on his side, because Amanda Nunes is somehow, despite all her accomplishments in the UFC, she's simultaneously both underrated and overrated. It's so strange to think about that. And the fact that if you look at Amanda Nunes when she fought against Holly Holm, Chris Cyborg, Ronda Rousey, she came all to those fights as underrated. And now that she's like a double belt champion, she's considered overrated off the basis that she's not popular. It's all strange. It is so bewildering. I talked about this in another podcast here, when I was comparing who are the greatest UFC fighters of all time. And I boiled it down to Anderson Silva, John Jones, George St. Pierre. But then a name was thrown out there, and that was Conor McGregor. So why was Conor McGregor thrown out there? Because statistically, Conor McGregor has just as good of performances as those three other fighters. Plus, he made much more money for the organization and for himself in such a shorter period of time. And I was thinking about, and I always kept thinking about Ronda Rousey. It's impossible not to talk about Ronda Rousey without including Conor McGregor, because both of them are kind of very identical in the sense that they are both two very popular fighters, two incredibly popular fighters. If you were to say, who are the top 5 most popular UFC fighters of all time, you can go 1 and 2, Ronda Rousey and Conor McGregor, without a doubt. But then we're talking about who is the greatest. And how do you measure an athlete being called the greatest? Or do we measure an athlete being the greatest based on star power, based on how much money is being sold, based on merchandising, based on championship victories, based on championship defenses? How do we judge who is the best? Because even John Jones, some might say that he is the best, but in other cases, some might say that he's actually not a great champion because of his misdemeanor issues outside the octagon. So what really makes someone a great fighter? And we got people from that camp, of the Ronda Rousey, Conor McGregor camp, who are like, okay, Amanda Nunes is overrated because she doesn't bring in that much revenue or money, and she doesn't carry herself as a great champion. She doesn't come across as like a mainstream superstar. I remember Dana was talking about this when he had to defend, he had to defend Amanda Nunes. So somebody wrote a report that said Ronda Rousey should defeat Amanda Nunes because Amanda Nunes is more popular than, because Amanda Nunes is not as popular as Ronda Rousey. So financially, it would be the smart decision for the UFC to support Ronda Rousey to defeat Amanda Nunes. And Dana White called the reporter an idiot and said Amanda Nunes is a great fighter because she defeats her opponents. And so Nunes is now both overrated and underrated in some sectors of the MMA community, because some sectors of the MMA community, we differentiate how good a fighter is based on multiple things that even pertain to outside of the octagon. And I'm talking about this now because as of this moment, when you look at Amanda Nunes versus Felicia Spencer, like, a lot of people are doubting on Felicia Spencer. I don't get why his coach is I don't get why Amanda Nunes' coach is talking about the incident in 2016. I understand, because it's impossible to talk about Amanda Nunes' career without talking about that one fight with Ronda Rousey years ago. I understand that. But he has to set his priorities straight here, because Felicia Spencer is a much more better fighter than Ronda Rousey. I know, it sounds strange, right? Felicia Spencer is a better fighter than Ronda Rousey? Yes. I say Felicia Spencer is just as good as Germaine de Randamie and is a better fighter than Ronda Rousey, and she is just also as good as Chris Cyborg. That's how much stock I'm putting into Felicia Spencer. I could be completely wrong here, and Nunes could be knocking out Felicia Spencer in less than like 30 seconds for all we know. But really, we can't count on Felicia, and it upsets me. And I talked about this also in another podcast, that a lot of fighters and a lot of people in their cornermen, coaches, trainers, they always upsell themselves while downselling another fighter. Because what's the point of the coach here talking about how great it is for Amanda Nunes, how great Amanda Nunes is, when she defeated Ronda Rousey years ago? They're not going to fight they're not going to fight each other anytime soon. Like Ronda Rousey, she's comfortable to where she is. She's making a whole lot of more money right now as a WWE wrestler, performing a handful of times per year compared to actually putting your body in the line, possibly getting concussed, and fighting against somebody, putting your life out there on the line against another fighter who wants to go knock you out, who wants to submit you for a lot less money. So what is the point of Din Thomas talking about, oh yeah, Ronda Rousey, she was all smoke and mirrors? Okay, yeah, maybe she was all smoke and mirrors. Maybe it was absolutely ridiculous on how the UFC was promoting Ronda Rousey versus Amanda Nunes, and that they were only promoting Ronda Rousey, but they were not upselling at all Amanda Nunes. In this scenario, it kind of is reverse, in that Felicia Spencer is being downsold a lot by everybody and anybody, from fight fans to fighters to coaches to trainers to analysts. A lot of people are downselling Felicia Spencer while upselling Amanda Nunes, and years ago, a lot of people were upselling Ronda Rousey and downselling Nunes. So this weird part of my brain tells me, could we see an upset here? A part of my brain tells me that there could be an upset, and for some reason I wouldn't be surprised. But at the same time I would, because Amanda Nunes is one of the greatest of all time. But you never know what could happen in the sport. You're listening to the GSMC Women's MMA Podcast, coming back right after the short break.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's gsmcpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
Hello and welcome back. So, Felicia Spencer is set to have the biggest fight of her life as she sets to go fight against double champion Amanda Nunes. So, who is Felicia Spencer? Well, I'll give you 5 things you might not know about Felicia Spencer. So, Felicia Spencer is a women's featherweight combatant who competes in the UFC. For her next outing, she's set to face, so in the time of this article being written, it was her prepping up against Chris Cyborg, and if you haven't checked it out yet, go look at Chris Cyborg versus Felicia Spencer. You're gonna look at that fight and be like, you know what? Yeah, Spencer, she's got skill. Like, she has a chance to defeat Amanda Nunes from that performance alone. Because yes, although Chris Cyborg won that fight though, she got the rub. Spencer got the rub out of that fight in the fact that, like, yeah, she lost the fight, but you know what? She came out of it looking a lot more better, and a lot more better towards the public opinion, than she did before the fight. So when I saw Chris Cyborg versus Felicia Spencer, I initially thought, okay, that was Chris Cyborg kind of being washed up, because I thought Chris Cyborg should be stopping this opponent very early, should be stopping this opponent in Felicia Spencer early in the first or second round, but instead, that didn't happen. Chris Cyborg, in her time in the UFC, transitioned from being this power knockout artist into being this very calculating, very passive, very smart fighter, fighting very safe, fighting very strategically, more based around finding angles and trying to win in a per round basis while focusing on striking efficiency. Then she did about, trying to knock you out within the first 30 seconds because she's scary. So that was Chris Cyborg transitioning from a power striker to a more methodical, very calculating striker. And so Chris Cyborg, she defeated Felicia Spencer, but Felicia Spencer, from that loss, she came from a bounce back, she came off that to bounce back with the win, and now she's set to face off against Amanda Nunes. And even though a lot of people are counting Nunes to go defeat Spencer pretty easily, though, we never know. We don't know what we can expect from Felicia Spencer. For all we know, she can win this fight in a surprising fashion. So I'll give you some interesting facts about Spencer as we're making our way up towards the title fight here. So, first round of fact, she more often than not wins via rear naked choke. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt Felicia Spencer has emerged victorious from 4 of her 7 bouts via rear naked choke. She has notably triumphed in each of her last 3 contests using this technique. In the Canadian Export's most recent fight and promotional debut at UFC Fight Night 152, she used her favorite submission mold to dispatch Megan Anderson. So yeah, that's Felicia Spencer in her UFC debut defeated Megan Anderson. Megan Anderson is a very game opponent and one of the best fighters in the division. So she also calls Florida home. So if you are a person in Florida, well, you got somebody who's kind of a Florida native and is Canadian. Spencer hails from Montreal, Canada, and it was there that the future fighter spent her formative years. However, at the age of 18, the teenager moved south to Florida, where she set up her home in Orlando. There, the new arrival study. By the way, in Orlando, Florida, if you don't know, the NBA is expected to make a big return in the Florida Disney area for some reason. Like they're gonna turn Disney World in Florida into an actual arena. It's very interesting to note that. But Orlando, Florida, it follows weird guidelines in the fact there are alligators and a lot of old people. Alligators and old people. That's the mantra of Orlando, Florida. There she studied in the University of Central Florida. She juggled her studies and alongside combat training at the Jungle MMA and Fitness under Coach Mike Lee and Seth Petruzzelli. The now 28-year-old Spencer continues to call the city and the gym home to this day. Seth Petruzzelli, if you don't know that fighter or you recognize that name, Seth Petruzzelli pretty much destroyed Kimbo Slice's MMA career. Not only did it destroy Kimbo Slice's MMA career, it destroyed the promotion's career, because the main event was Kimbo Slice against this jobber nobody, Seth Petruzzelli, and the idea was that Kimbo Slice was going to go in, he's going to knock out, he's going to destroy Seth Petruzzelli, and from what I remember about that fight, was that there was a video that leaked out on YouTube, on Joe Rogan. Like, he was watching the fight, and he's all drunk, and he's like, hey man, Seth Petruzzelli's gonna defeat Kimbo Slice. Petruzzelli's wrestling is better than Kimbo. And there's this huge ordeal that went on about Seth Petruzzelli being paid not to take down Kimbo Slice because Kimbo Slice was obviously gonna lose. So, Seth Petruzzelli, the grappler, ended up knocking out Kimbo Slice in less than 10 seconds. So if you want anybody to teach you how to strike, it would have to be the person you least expect. So Seth Petruzzelli is the trainer of Felicia Spencer. And who knows? Let's think of the narrative there. The trainer of Felicia Spencer is the same person that nobody predicted into knocking out one of the biggest hype trains in all of combat sports, Kimbo Slice. Can you imagine if the trainer of that trainer ends up training Felicia, is the one that trains Felicia Spencer to be the one to go and knock out Amanda Nunes in 10 seconds? That would be so mind-boggling and be so amazing if that were to happen. Like, what are the odds? She is a lifelong martial artist. At the age of 4, Phenom commenced her martial arts journey. Initially, she practiced Taekwondo before transitioning to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu 8 years later. When she was 12 years old, she would go on to earn black belts in both disciplines. At the age of 17, Felicia Spencer added kickboxing to her training regimen, and a year later, on her arrival to Orlando, Florida, she began training in mixed martial arts. So in terms of mixed martial arts, she's kind of newish, but she has a background in combat sports for years, so that helps her out in her transition. I think I remember a video by Dewey Ramsey where he talked about how learning karate doesn't make you a good MMA fighter, but having that knowledge of karate helps you become a better MMA fighter. And that's how it is with Felicia Spencer, in that, yes, she didn't train in mixed martial arts, or train primarily for MMA at an early age, but because she has all this experience when it comes to combat sports, her transition towards MMA is a lot more easier, and you see her making a lot less mistakes than a whole lot of people would be if they just came into mixed martial arts with very little training. She is also a teacher. Spencer has always combined her MMA career with teaching. She is currently employed as a 6th grade algebra teacher by the Florida Virtual School, Phenom enjoys working for the internet-based public high school and despite her success in the cage, has no plans to give up the job. She also coaches children in mixed martial arts gyms, the jungle, MMA, and fitness. Spencer said in one interview, "Teaching is always going to be part of my life." So good job for you, Felicia. I've talked about it in other podcasts before, where it always bothers me when there are fighters who are so devoted and focused in their career as a mixed martial artist that they are not thinking a couple steps ahead in advance or thinking of alternate ways to go make income, because you don't make that much income as an MMA fighter. Even a fighter like John Jones, even though the guy is a millionaire, he's not making that much money as compared to, he's going through a lot more stress and going through a lot more pain in his career and has gone through a lot more scrutiny. Like, there's a lot of baggage that goes into being a famous athlete. And when the money you're making in terms of famous athletes doesn't measure up, then it ain't really worth it then. It's not. I got friends in my personal life who work at Google, who work at Facebook, who work a lot more easier jobs. Even they themselves tell me, like, oh, it's a pretty easy, any idiot can do my job. And they're being paid pretty much above $250,000. Yeah, about above a quarter. One of them just got themselves like a raise, so they're now making about $350K per year right now working for Google. And he's only like 26 years old. He's making $350K, only 26 years old, waking up, working 9 to 5, come home. He's pretty much, he doesn't have $1 million yet, but he's pretty much almost there. So yeah, so good on Felicia Spencer here for having a job in the side while becoming a mixed martial arts fighter, because then that means accumulatively you're making the most money you possibly can. You're making some money as a teacher, you're making some money as a trainer, you're making some money as a pro fighter, you're making money from advertising. Making money in the world of mixed martial arts is incredibly difficult, and I am always happy when there's a fighter out there who knows how to make money in alternative ways that goes beyond just fighting. So good on her for that. In fact, one of the reasons she did not try out for the 28th season of The Ultimate Fighter last year was because she didn't want to quit her day job. Spencer was confident that as long as she kept winning, that her opportunity with the UFC would eventually come, and there was no need to disrupt her teaching post in order to participate in the show. I'm happy for her. Because of the fact that I went to Berkeley and I have a background in education as it pertains to teaching, then I can only relate to her on that point. She has won a title. Note, all because you don't have a UFC title doesn't mean you weren't a champion at one point. Michelle Waterson was the atomweight champion for another division at one point. So prior to signing with the UFC, Phenom had competed solely for Invicta FC. Following a successful amateur tenure, she had her first bout with the all-women's promotion back in September 2015. Spencer would go unbeaten across 6 fights with Invicta FC. In her last outing with their promotion in November last year, the Canadian export fought Pam Sorensen for the vacant featherweight strap. The 28-year-old seized with the win and the belt in a 4th round rear naked choke. Spencer would never defend the belt as soon as she joined the UFC. So she technically, she resigned her title reign as champion undefeated. She can brag about that to her students. Yes, I was a mixed martial arts champion. And yes, I was undefeated as a champion in mixed martial arts. And then I went to the UFC and I fought Chris Cyborg and Amanda Nunes. And if she were to defeat Amanda Nunes, wow, that would be a really cool teacher to have if I was a student. So that's Felicia Spencer. Hopefully you can go cheer for her in her bout against Amanda Nunes. Hopefully it doesn't become a one-sided battle that everyone is predicting so far it's going to be. I expect it to be a really close battle, and Spencer can catch Amanda Nunes off guard. Who knows? That does it for today's podcast. Thank you for listening to the GSMC Women's MMA Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'd like to ask that you please remember to subscribe to the show and write a nice review. That really helps up. Also, if you can please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thank you, and have a good night.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Women's Mixed Martial Arts Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.